Okay.
I can't. I used to wear other kinds of hat, but I can't do it anymore. All right, we're ready to roll. Welcome everyone to Planetary Gig Talk Live, Ho'oponopono, music, and quantum theory. I'm Jefferson Glassie, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gigs Society, whose mission is creating unity through music, or as I like to say, making connections through music with the intention of bringing peace. And man, this has been one heck of a series that we've had on Ho'oponopono and music. So glad to have episode 4 here with our stellar panel of musicians and fabulous thinkers. First, let me introduce Grammy Award winner, Roy Futureman Wooten. Roy, thank you so much for being with us again.
Thanks for having me, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion. I love this continuation of this subject, and ready to go down the rabbit hole with everybody. Looking forward to it.
All right. And he's the guitar monk. He plays with Joe Vitale, who is the author of, with Dr. Hugh Len, of the book Zero Limits, which kind of brought all this into the public consciousness. So happy once again, Mathew Dixon. Nice to see you. Thank you.
Great to be back. Excited to hear what I'm actually going to learn as we discuss all of this.
I hear you. Yeah, it was.
We all know it's kind of. I mean, I'm sure other people have spoken on the subject, but there's a lot of uncharted territory, and I think it's going to be fascinating. I'm excited about it, so I hope everybody else enjoys it.
Yeah, we'll see where we go. And then, you know, last but not least, such a good friend, fabulous illustrator and musician, Patricia Raine. Patty, thank you so much.
I'm looking forward to this. As Roy mentioned, we're going down, we're all Alice, and we're all going to go down a rabbit hole today and see what happens.
Yeah, it's so awesome. So just a little bit of backdrop. I'm not sure that I would have put together Ho'oponopono and music, except that when I attended Victor Wooten's Spirit of Music camp at Wooten Woods the last couple of years, he had a session on Ho'oponopono, and Roy was sort of the lead was leading that discussion. And then since we've all been in the pandemic and we've had the opportunity to do these virtual conversations, I just thought, boy, that's really something I'd like to explore. And, you know, it just by magic, it all happened that, you know, these great folks have come together to have these discussions. And we had one, you can find all these on the Planetary Gigs Society page on Facebook or on YouTube. We had a sort of an introductory discussion of Ho'oponopono and music, and didn't realize there might be another one. But then we wanted to keep talking, and there was another one. I think we titled it Transitioning to Connectivity. And then the concept came up of, well, how we'd like to discuss how Ho'oponopono can help artists and musicians through that creative process. And that was number 3. And that was really good conversation. I mean, I learned a lot, and learned a lot the whole time. And then at the end of that conversation, Mathew said the words quantum physics, and everybody's head exploded, and we all got excited and said, we have to do another one. So
Sorry.
no, we're so happy about it. And we're not 100% sure, as everyone has said, exactly where this goes. But we're just going to try it out anyway, because it's good stuff. And once again, our leadoff hitter, Patty, could you just, you know, kind of set the scene for us and for this conversation?
Well, we're going to be talking about quantum mechanics or quantum physics. I always have a difficulty with the term quantum mechanics, which I'll go into later. It feels like an oxymoron to me. Quantum is nonlinear and mechanics is linear. So, but the basics of quantum mechanics, and as it relates to healing modalities like Ho'oponopono, or creative endeavors like music or art, it has to do with the microcosm. So I just looked at basic definitions of quantum mechanics. It is the physics. It's the physics that explains how everything works from a microscopic perspective. It's the best description we have so far of the nature of the particles that make up matter and the forces with which they interact. So that's sort of a basic. And then it differs from classical physics in that, let's see, it describes aspects of, quantum physics describes aspects of nature on an ordinary or classical physics, sorry. This is a jigsaw puzzle. Classical physics, on the other hand, describes aspects of nature on an ordinary or macroscopic level, like an apple falling from the tree, you know, and all the things that go into that, gravitation and so on. While quantum mechanics explains the aspect of nature of small microscopic atom subatomic scales, atomic or subatomic scales, for which classical mechanics is insufficient. So that's what we're going into. We're going into the microscopic forces behind nature, behind all kinds of things. And they're right now, you know, they're doing all kinds of experiments on quantum biology and quantum chemistry and all kinds of exciting things only in the last decade. And I find it really odd that there was no cross-referencing, there was no cross-pollination of these disciplines, that physicists stayed over here in the A to B, B to C, you know, controlled experiment, and they didn't look at biology and they didn't look at chemistry. They'd stayed away from it, and they poo-pooed the idea of any kind of non-linear or non-A to B, B to C phenomena going on. That really is stunning to me, that only in the last 10 years that they delved into this. And all of this applies to creative processes of all stripe. That is, artists are more likely to collaborate with one another, and they're more likely to look at the disciplines of science to help to explain what's happening in their own, you know, in their own fields. And so is healing. Energetic healing is more likely to look at science and saying, oh, what matches and what works, and be sort of collaborative there, because energetically phenomena are going on that cannot be calibrated, they cannot construct experiments for, you know, but they're happening nonetheless. So, and two, in classical, in quantum physics, objects have characteristics of both particles and waves. They're both ands. So the whole idea of a both and is presented here. And all they can measure is how accurately the value of a physical quality can be predicted prior to measurement, given a complete set of physical conditions. That is, if you set up an experiment, you can only describe the probability of an outcome. And that's called the uncertainty principle. Whereas in physics, it's certain, 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 certain. You know, I mean, this is all uncertainty. So we're going into the realm of uncertainty. Let's see, what else? Here we go. The fundamental feature of quantum theory, quantum mechanical theory, is that it usually cannot predict with certainty what will happen, but can only give probabilities. So that's classic. And Max Born came up with the Born rule. He was able to, with an equation, determine where a particle, the possibility of where a particle can be found. And it's the best that the theory can do. And then there are things like quantum interference, quantum tunneling, and quantum, what else is the other one? Quantum entanglement. And so quantum interference is that this is waves and particles. They interfere with each other. They do experiments, the so-called double slit experiment, where they found that if you put a wave through, the wave interferes with itself on the other side. You know, it's really stunning. And then quantum tunneling is that a particle that goes up against a potential barrier can cross it. This doesn't happen in physics, but in quantum physics, it does. It can cross it. Even if its kinetic energy, its basic energy, is smaller than the potential for crossing the barrier. In classical mechanics, this particle would be trapped. The consequences of this quantum tunneling are radioactive decay, nuclear fusion, our star, the sun. That's quantum tunneling. It's just, woo, you know. And then there's quantum entanglement. It says when quantum systems interact, these are microscopic systems, and they interact. So you can transfer this, turn this into a metaphor for the creative process. So when we're in a creative process or a healing process, there's entanglement going on. There is entanglement going on. Entanglement says quantum systems interact. Their properties become so intertwined that a description of the whole in terms of the individual parts is no longer possible. You cannot describe the creative process except in particular, you know, individual sense. You know, you can't describe it, but it's a holistic event. And the characteristic trait of quantum mechanics, the one that enforces its entire departure from classical lines, quantum is the one that enforces its entire departure from classical lines of thought. That's Erwin Schrödinger. It's telepathy, and it does not follow, you know, it does not follow normal, you know, everyday phenomena. So, and my favorite, one of my favorite quotes too, and we can go to your quote, Roy, is philosopher physicist Niels Bohr, who conceived the principle of complementarity. And this is yin yang. This is Chinese 5-element theory. This is all of this stuff. But he conceived it in the Western thought of complementarity, that items could be separately analyzed in terms of contradictory properties, such as behaving like a stream of particles or a wave. So they complement, you know. And his quote, and he was also influenced by the philosopher Kierkegaard, which it influenced his whole life. So he was a much more holistic, for my money, a much more holistic physicist than others. Einstein was as well. Einstein called quantum mechanics. He says, I cannot seriously believe in it because the theory cannot be reconciled with the idea that physics should represent a reality in time and space, free from spooky action at a distance. So he didn't exactly, in this letter I found, he didn't exactly say spooky action. He used the term, the German term, spukhafte Fernwirkung. And spukhafte is ghostly.
Same thing.
Ghostly interaction. He couldn't reconcile it in time and space. He didn't like the idea that one particle could communicate with another particle or wave, you know. And there's a common misconception that it's faster than the speed of light. It's not. I looked that up too. But he had a very difficult time with the fact that a particle could communicate at a distance with another particle. And that is precisely what's happening in the creative process. That's precisely what's happening in healing processes. That kind of communication, and in our bodies, that kind of communication is going on all the time. I was going to add too that Niels Bohr made this comment. He said, there is no quantum world. This is an interesting statement. There's no quantum world. This is only an abstract physical description. It is wrong to think that the task of physics is to find out how nature is. Physics concern only with what we can say about nature, you know, what we observe and what we can say. We can't say for certain. So he's literally trying to consolidate this uncertainty principle, you know. So, I mean, so again, all of this applies to our creative processes, healing processes, everything.
One of the ways I think of it, sort of the old physics was rules. This happens, that happens. And the new quantum theory is no rules.
No rules. And I, like I said, I always had a problem with the term mechanics, quantum mechanics, like attaching mechanics to it. It's almost like there's segue between classical physics and the microscopic world. They had to segue it with mechanics. I mean, it implies, and this is my thing, it implies an A to B, B to C construct in which there are buttons to push, levers to pull, and gears to engage. The behavior of quanta and quarks belies that description. The behavior of quanta seems to be wholly reliant on feeling and sensation and whatever the environment of the now indicates. That's my quote. That's how I feel. You can feel it. You're feeling things. You're feeling your way through things when you create, and you're feeling your way through things when you're doing healing modalities like Ho'oponopono. So that's my spiel.
Great intro. I think we're going to our number two, or second up, Matthew. So I know you're into this stuff. What are your thoughts about?
Well, I have so many. As I said,
yeah.
Patty's very inspiring there.
Yes.
Yeah. Again, you know, there is no expert in this subject, and I think that's kind of the point of, you know, it doesn't really exist. It only exists as much as we allow it to exist. Which that statement in itself almost doesn't make any sense. The thing that I go back to the most is the concept of the importance of a witness. Mostly just as a human, we need that witness to be involved, which is, even with the particles and the slit theory, it only reacts different when it's being watched. Otherwise, it does something else, and we don't necessarily get to know. Do you want to say something, Roy? Or?
No, I'm just like,
Okay.
like you hitting it right on the head.
So the for me, you know, without going into a huge story here, but I'll tell you, back February 6th, I almost died in a car accident. Oh. And it was the most scary thing that I can remember experiencing in my life. But luckily there was one other car involved, because it was really early in the morning. It was about 3:30. And somehow I went through the whole entire wreckage without a scratch, nothing. There's a couple ways to look at it. It's really easy to deny when things happen like that, or you can accept that they did. I pulled off, this trucker pulled off, and he said, "I don't know how you did that." The only way I could describe it in my mind was, I ripped a hole in the time-space continuum somewhere and somebody let me through for 1 second. That sounds crazy. I don't go around telling people that, although now I'm sharing it here, which is kind of ridiculous. I could say that, or I could be like, wow, I got really lucky. Either one, it's the same outcome. But when I got home, I thanked my car. I hugged my car. I actually kissed my car, because I was like, I can't believe we got through this. Thank you so much. It wasn't time. And people can say it wasn't time, or you can say things warped. I know that Roy likes to bring up Star Wars a lot. I'm a humongous Star Wars fan.
Yes.
So a lot of that concept that Lucas spoke about in the beginning with the Force and what it is basically the quantum theory. Because that's we can either live in that world or not, but we are living in that world whether we accept it or not. But do we get a full understanding? not right now, because we're human beings. We are part of witnessing everything together so that it can be real, so that we can see what it is. So we do have things that we have control over that we don't even know we have control over. Our health, for one, you know, how you handle things with your health, whether or not you slide through a car accident and don't ever get hit or the next person does. This is where I try to bring these things back into the Ho'oponopono world, because as Dr. Lin talks about, with data and everything being energy and everything flying around us, we can't even see the majority of it. It's beyond us. We're not in a physical place where we can do that. We can experience a certain amount of it. And if we just take it right back to the very basics and we clean on it, that's going to be the only little bit of control that we possibly have. And then you just sit and, to quote my friend Joe, expect miracles. Man, miracles every single day. You know, you start to look at your human body and the fact that we breathe and we eat and we wake up in the morning and somehow do all these things, those are miracles. They're pretty incredible. Not everything is walking on water, you know. those are the biggies. But those are not impossible either. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the only way that I can kind of elaborate on what you just said.
Makes plenty of sense, Matthew. I'm glad you're okay.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, we all are.
Wow.
Roy, what do you have to say?
Yeah, well, I just
Better.
kind of want to follow up. It's just he resonated with something that Linda said about the experiment when they send the waves through the slits. And if you're not paying attention to the waves act like waves on the other side and they make patterns of waves. But as soon as you look at the experiment, all of a sudden the waves act like dots on the other side, like they're supposed to. They behave. It's like they somehow are responding to just the fact that we're looking at it. And so for me, a lot of times when I hear these stories like that, it seems like there's an overarching moral of the story. What is the moral of the story? And somehow our intention is profound, you know, in the equation, in the divine equations that are going on. And I say divine equations because if we're saying mechanics and stuff, they're looking for equations. But when you get to quantum mechanics, we're looking for divine equations that are beyond, you know, it's like who can number the hairs on a man's head? You know, that's another type of science, you know. And so I wanted to share, it's sort of like gearing up for this. I saw the documentary called Thrive 2. And years ago, there was a documentary called Thrive, and then they came out with a second one called Thrive 2. And towards the end, they quoted Max Planck because they were talking about all kinds of new kind of engines and energy systems that were going to power our healing systems, our energy systems, and solutions that we need going forward. Our communication systems, as we're dealing with 5G technology and all these technologies, there are holistic ways of dealing with all of this. And so they quoted Max Planck, and Max Planck said that all matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force. Okay? We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. The mind is the matrix of all matter. Max Planck, originator of quantum theory. Now, that was a big assumption he just jumped to, but it's like he's going to, when they're seeing all of this design principles behind what it is that we see in nature, we see all of this design principle, and as quantum mechanics starts to go to the smaller and smaller, the phenomenon is that they start finding more and more space. You know, like where quantum mechanics ends at the atom. Regular mechanics ends at the atom. Quantum mechanics goes down to the cymatic vibrational nature of the atom, and they just see like vibration that's coalescing into something that looks like matter, but it's not really quite matter. So it's like we're living in a sea of something. But Max Planck said that we must assume behind all of this, we must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind, and that mind is the matrix of all matter. And so when he says matrix, it seems like why is it that the design principle of silver produces that, or the divine principle of gold, the equation produces that? Like, what is the design principle behind it? And so with that, I want to jump to, like, there's a scientist, I can't remember his name right now, but I just saw him. He did an interview with Tom Bilyeu in his new his impact theory talking. And the scientist speaks on as if we're living in a matrix or a simulation, or he says, imagine that we're in the game Grand Theft Auto. You can go into that world of Grand Theft Auto, and the design principles have been made where that world acts like a world that's outside of that world. You turn the steering wheel, it goes that way. You jump up, you come back down according to the laws of gravity that exist outside of the world of Grand Theft Auto. So if you're trying to study the world of Grand Theft Auto inside the game, you could still be way off. You know what I mean? You still could be way off on, like, what is the design principle of this whole world? And it seems like when we talk about Ho'oponopono and quantum mechanics, now we're starting to get into, like Matthew said, this is not walking on water, but it's just as astounding. You know, so it's like there's miracles and showtime that shows itself in our world that's something different. It's like based off of another principle from this world. So Patty said something about Einstein said, well, I'm uncomfortable with spooky action at a distance, right? And that just reminds me of Dr. Hugh Lin, right? When we first saw him speak, when Joe Vitale invited him to come speak to a group of us, he said, you can be practicing Ho'oponopono, which is a Hawaiian art form of forgiveness. For whatever's going wrong in the world, we're trying to forgive our part in the dream. Like, do we have a connection to it? And we're just trying to forgive our part of it so that maybe the dream can correct itself somehow, right? But he says they were working on a forgiveness Ho'oponopono with a lady over here, and a pregnancy way on another part of the world was made easier because what they were doing there. Now that's spooky action at a distance. He says, I can't explain that. You know what I mean? But it's showing that we're connected some kind of way, in a way that we don't know. And it seems like quantum mechanics is starting to get to, there is a bigger picture that's outside of what we call reality. See what I'm saying? And it seems like anyone who's talking like Dr. Hugh Lin, they're speaking of a reality where even inanimate objects have some type of consciousness. The whole fabric of our reality is somehow conscious, and that there's conscious design behind it, you know. So it just gets fascinating. But with that, I want to read a quote from the book Illusions, right? I'm going through this book with a friend, right? And the book,
Bach?
this is by Richard Bach, yes.
Yeah, I
Right,
read
the
that
book
when I was a
Illusions,
kid.
right? And so there's a and speaking of quantum mechanics, the Messiah in this book is a car mechanic, airplane mechanic. He works on machines and stuff, right? And he just understands reality so much that he never needs to fill up with gas. There's no bugs and flies hitting his windshield. And the student, Richard Box, is trying to figure out, man, what are you dealing with? What's going on, right? And he keeps overriding theme talking about we're living in a simulation, or we're living in a world that's illusory, and that our attention plays on it. So those are two big morals of the story that I want to get to. When we look at the experiment that Linda talked about in the very beginning, if we don't look at it, reality does what it does. It acts more like a wave than stuff. You know what I mean? But when you look at it, then it acts like a dot. Okay, that's already like our intention, right? So if you think about our intention, right? I'm going to read this quote in a minute. But our intention, the way our intention plays on Dr. Emoto, when he freezes water, right? He freezes water and watches how the water crystallizes. And depending on what we think to the water will crystallize different based off of our intention, based to the music that's played to it, based to a word pasted on the jar. It's showing some kind of way that living construct is reacting to our intention. So our intention on water, our intention on our physical reality, on our blood. I want to put this out there. There's a book called Holographic Blood by Dr. I forget what the guy's name, but that's the title of the book. Holographic Blood. And under a microscope, going the quantum mechanic way, they see pictures in the blood, holograms, right? It's a hologram because they can take this drop of blood and they see the picture. They take another drop of blood and the blood is making holographic pictures of the events in your life. So, and he shows the pictures in the book. So there's a lady pregnant and you can see the baby, the image of the baby's in a picture of the blood. Now that's a divine equation. See what I'm saying? Now that's some spooky action at a distance. Like Einstein is not going to get his equation on that. See what I mean? But he's looking at it so much so that there was a doctor who was afraid to look in the microscope. He came to visit. He says, he's asking him all these questions. He says, I don't have to answer your question. All you got to do is just look in the microscope and tell me what you see. And the guy wouldn't do it. Right? So what I'm saying, so how we feel about it is a big thing. Dr. Hugh Lin talked about that. When something happens wrong in the life, Ho'oponopono says we're supposed to accept full responsibility for what's happening in our dream. You know what I mean? To treat this simulation or treat reality, as if it's like a dream, that we're responsible if we're in a nightmare, some kind of way we're connected to it. Like whatever's happening, there you are, And so I was going to say, again, just to overarch and not take all the time, when you take cymatics, I think, Linda, you might have mentioned it, but cymatics, you can just hit like a glass of vibrating powder, and you just bow a note, ooh, and the powder will assume a complex diagram. You know what I mean? And it's like the water will do that. And so quantum mechanics is saying there's some type of frequencies that's causing the microparticles that we call them atoms on this level, but the further we go down, it just seems like it's a vibration kind of pattern with a design principle behind it that Max Planck says we have to assume that there's a divine mind behind it. So my thing is that two big takeaways for me is like with Ho'oponopono, we were supposed to take responsibility for what we see out there. All the stuff we see on the news, stuff we don't agree with, sickness and illness, how we feel about it has such a big play on the whole thing, our intention. So the quote from Illusion says, "The world is your exercise book. The pages on which you do your sums is not reality. Although you can express reality there if you wish, you are also free to write nonsense or lies or to tear the pages." So it feels like the nature of a game that we were playing and getting good at, maybe. So
I've always been taken by the aspect of quantum theory, or in the slit experiment and the observer and all that. So if there's an observer and sees this particle or wave, and all of a sudden that thing stops doing all of its whatever, and then can be, it kind of comes into reality or comes into focus and can be measured. Well, how is there an observer unless the observer is observed? So now we've got all of the particles observing all of the other particles, and in a way it's sort of a communal joint creative process where we create our reality. And if you come back to Ho'oponopono with that and music, when you're saying, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, and you're sort of cleaning out the stuff, you can let that, it's like an opportunity for that creativity or that intention to come through. I mean, if you're just observing, is that intention? Or maybe it's inherent in observation that there's intention.
I think it's inherent
in observation,
in human nature to observe. But I think, a lot of this relates to Rupert Sheldrake's when it was introduced, heretical morphogenic resonance.
ooh.
In which he says, and this relates to I was looking at cymatics in the late 90s. I had a conversation with Linda about this regarding how to understand my own synesthesia. I see sound. I see color, shape, form, boom, boom, boom. It's just there. I can't. And so I was looking for things to explain or that were similar to the phenomenon. Cymatics is one, and morphogenic resonance is another. Sheldrake says, the idea of mysterious telepathy type interconnections between organisms and of collective memories within species, and accounts for phantom limbs, how dogs know where their owners are when their owners are coming home, and how people know when someone is staring at them. He's done all kinds of experiments, and he was just laughed out of the halls of science. He's a biologist, but he started relating it to it's structures of activity and subsequent morphic resonance is the influence of previous structures of activity on subsequent similar structures of activity organized by morphic fields. It enables memories to pass across both space and time from the past. The greater the similarity, the greater the influence of morphic resonance. That's entanglement. That's what's the other guy? The classical or the quantum, not entanglement, is that? Yeah, quantum tunneling. Talking about quantum tunneling, where something is happening that belies of everyday physical reality. It's a phenomenon. And the other thing I wanted to say too, regarding Max Planck's quote, he said, it's the mind. There's a mind behind this that is a design. Those are human terms to describe. And Niels Bohr would say, okay, we're describing it in rather weak human terms. The best we can say is that it's a phenomenon. Mind is something else. Force, it's a phenomenon, a phenomena going on. And the idea of the great design going on. Yeah, it has design constituents, but it will change on a dime when you try to observe it. And I always thought that, if we're looking at a wave through this slit experiment, if we're looking at these waves, and it's a one continuous waves, and between the two slits, it breaks up into other waves, and then we look at it, and I thought it turns itself into a particle because we can't conceive of the wave. We can't conceive of it. Our puny minds, can't conceive of the wave.
Inconceivable.
Yeah.
Inconceivable.
Exactly. So that's why when you say the mind, when someone says, the mind, these are men, like the men of early physics, classical physics, and those that tried to bridge classical physics to quantum, that is Einstein and Planck and Bohr and these first guys, Planck and Einstein. They wrote, it's called Old Quantum Theory. But they tried to bridge it, but they bridged the two. They segued between the two using terms that belong to mechanical physics.
You can't bridge something like that.
No, you can't. That's it.
It's the purpose.
But that's part of what Ho'oponopono is about, and all healing modalities that allow a forgiveness. And forgiveness is a release of going down a thought pattern, and allowing thought patterns to disassemble and to allow new conceptions to come in, because heretofore we have not been able to conceive of it. We have not been able to conceive of things like forgiveness. Go ahead, Matthew. I'm sorry.
Can I share a story that's probably not going to sound that amazing, but I think it is exactly what we're talking about.
Excellent.
So basically, I wrote a song called From Zero. This was before even meeting Dr. Wooten, but I had already met Joe. I knew that this song was Ho'oponopono. I was getting that internal message. I was also told, you're not allowed to sell that song from the universe. So I didn't. But that song ended up on several albums still, but it's always available for free. But when I met Dr. Wooten and I got to talk to him and Ma Bell Katz, and I got to talk about my music and how I wanted to integrate Ho'oponopono and I wanted it to be healing music, I got their advice And a lot of it was kind of like Roy was saying, it was, you got to talk to your guitar. You got to talk to the, I'm wheeling my gear out because I'd been playing that night. And they're like, you got to talk to that dolly that's, you know, carrying your gear and be grateful. And, you know, and I'm going, whoa, all right, okay, I can do that. You know, this is where it is. I've got to accept everything as much as I possibly can. So it's not like I came up and invented the idea of including Ho'oponopono with music, but I was getting that message. And then I meet Jefferson, and he got the same thing. Without us even knowing each other, he was inspired and wrote a whole entire song that was Ho'oponopono based. The melody came to him, and he told the story in one of our earlier sessions. And to me, that is exactly it's happening over here and it's happening over here. And hey, we're lucky enough to get to find out about it right now, but
It's morphic resonance.
somewhere else too, you know, it's all over the place. It's not for us to know that it's there. It's for us to, as Roy was saying, accept our part of, if we're doing it and you're doing it and he's doing it and Jefferson's doing it and Linda and Bonnie and whoever else is here, you know, and then the people listening, if they're doing it, we're all part of that one thing. We're all part of that I, that source, you know, put a name on it because we have to, but
Yeah,
I think that's what it comes down to. And kind of like we were talking before we got online, and Roy was talking about Dave Matthews Band, and I was saying, oh yeah, man, I remember when Dave Matthews came out, and I was just kind of blown away that everybody accepted what was happening and what those guys were all doing, because they're all friends of Roy's. It was amazing, and it resonated across our whole world. So I think from a creative standpoint, as any artist, and I always try to go with any artist, not just a musician, although I know we are, you know, we focus on music because that's what we do. I think that's the point. I think that resonation, that thing that it's very difficult to trust yourself or to trust the divine instinct to come through. But if you're doing it, somebody else is doing it, and we're all part of that one thing. So that's all I want to say.
That's great, and I will follow up on that. It made me think about, like, earlier before people got on, I was talking about this phenomenon a lot of times when an artist, quote unquote, just takes off, you know, and sometimes it just happens, like with Dave Matthews, they just all of a sudden they were playing these little rock clubs, and even with the Bela Fleck and the Flecktones, we were playing nice concert halls and stuff. And we'd go over there and watch them in the little rock club, sticky beer cans and all of a sudden. Then all of a sudden we were opening for them at the like Hampton Coliseum. And it just was like this resonance. The same thing, this morphic resonance. Something resonated with all those people. And I remember they're friends of mine, man, right? So I'm looking, I'm going, wow, are they really going to fill up this place? And that place filled up so fast. And all of those songs were not out, but everybody was singing the words. And Dave is mumbling, and everybody knows the words. They're passing tapes around. That's when, you know, the Grateful Dead thing, where people are passing tapes. So to see this resonance, it seemed like it relates to this kind of spooky action at a distance, something going on. And I saw the same thing with Kenny G when he did his first quote unquote smooth jazz album. There was no name for smooth jazz at the time. He just said this is what he was hearing, you know, because before then he was playing da, 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 you know, the cool almost yakety sax, but you know, hot. It was hot, and he just wanted to just do cool and whatever, you know. And man, that record took off so fast. It was just like I asked him when I saw him, man. He was opening for Whitney Houston. I was like, dude, what happened? He says, I don't know, but I can get Clive Davis on the phone now. You know, so I'm just trying to bring it down. A lot of times this resonance that you were talking about, Pat, you know, seeing it happen. A lot of times if you look at your, you know, favorite artist or somebody that you know, there was a point where all of a sudden what they did just started resonating, where it just wasn't going to be stopped. And then I was going to relate that to that morphic resonance that you talked about, to the story of the 100th monkey, where they teach a few monkeys on a separate island how to wash their sweet potatoes. So they're just doing it in their own little local world.
That's morphic resonance.
Yes, and then after a certain point, all the monkeys on all the different islands are doing it, and there's no connection. Now we're back to Einstein. That's spooky accent at a distance. But there you go. The world is like, what did it say? It's an exercise book, and a lot of times it's exercising its principles for us to look at it and make sense out of it. What does it mean when the wave all of a sudden you look at it, it acts like a dot? I mean, that's a big jump. You know, like we're not looking at it and we look at the marks that it made, it acted like a wave. That was his signature, was a wave signature. But we look at it, it's dot signature. Yeah.
What I was going to say, Roy, is that when we look at something and the wave turns into a particle.
Yes.
My conception was that the universe is dumbing itself down for us.
Huh.
Yes, yes. And that's not necessarily a bad term.
No.
Sometimes you have to take out stuff in order to see the picture.
We have to go to kindergarten at some point regarding the matrix, regarding all this stuff. And that's basically kindergarten. Okay, here, I'll make myself into something that you understand, which is physical.
Yes.
Well, and can I ask this? That illusions book, I'm not sure it's in that book or not, because I was probably in the 3rd or 4th grade when I read it. It's been a long time. I think I did one other reread in high school with it. Is there a part in that book where they walk into a music store and the guy picks up an instrument and just starts playing it?
I think so.
Have you read it recently? One of Bach's books has that. And he doesn't know how to play, and I can't remember if it was a guitar or a fiddle or what it was. And he goes, well, do you know how to play? And he goes, no. And then he picks it up and he just starts playing beautifully.
Yeah, I can't remember if it's this one.
Sounds like it could be in one of Victor's books.
Yeah. Well, I know Vic was inspired by Richard Bach. So
but the point of that was, that seems like anybody who was reading that, or the majority of the people, I should say, not anybody, because I can't speak for everybody, you kind of go, oh, that's totally impossible. You know, I've had to spend years studying how to be a musician, that nobody can just walk in, pick up an instrument and play. But that's the point of the conversation, whether it happened or not. And the book wasn't a factual book, it was a fictional book. But it's the idea that, you know what, that is possible, because if we start to look at the microcosm world, things like that can happen. And that's where the big miracles are. And of course, the big miracles are really exciting. Everybody wants the big miracle. But like Patty was saying, we got to go to kindergarten first, right? You know, so enjoy those little ones. And then your big one shows up when you don't get in that car accident. You go, woo, I got a big miracle today. I don't know, you know, of course you want one again right away. You know, hey, what's the lottery numbers for tomorrow?
Let me see if I can draw a line through some of this. You know, in the beginning of Illusions, there's that great little part, handwritten, about these creatures at the bottom of the creek, and they're clinging to the rocks.
Yes.
Every once in a while, they look up in the water and they see something going by, and they're like, wow. And then after a while, one of these dudes says, I'm tired of clinging to these rocks. And he lets go and he tumbles and, you know, whatever. And then he goes up into the water and starts flying through the water.
Yes.
And the other people clinging to the rocks, they like, it's a Messiah. There's God up there.
Flying.
So, and I'm going to try to put this through to music, but so one of the things that I've been fascinated by quantum physics theory, whatever it is, for a long time, and we were having a conversation with some people one night, and you know, about the spooky action at a distance and all these things, and they're like, I can't see how this has any relevance to our lives.
Who said that?
Well, just some people in a conversation, but the point is, in a way, that, well, but it's true, so maybe we can learn from things that we don't know.
Yes.
And in Ho'oponopono, you know, when you can do the humanly thing of letting go, forgiving, appreciating, having gratitude, it sort of cleans it out for the things that you don't know. And in music as well, you know, you're trying to play, you're doing this, and when you can let go, and we talked last time about the creative process, when you sort of are able to go into the place where you don't know the space, that's when things happen. It's almost like, well, the letting go and the unknowingness, the zero limits, as Roy says, I don't know nothing. I don't know anything about this, or I'm going to say I don't know nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of, it begins to tie in, and I think it's helpful in a way, because it's okay to not have any idea what it all means.
It's
Yeah.
always okay. It's always okay to not. We go into the creative process, is the terror of the blank page, the terror of the blank sheet music, the terror of. I mean, you're going into it on a kind of faith that there's a process here, and I enter into it. I have no idea what's going to happen.
Yes.
None. But I'm gratified when something does. And as you said at our first conversation, Roy, just grabbing things out of the air.
Yeah, like an antenna.
Yes, and your muse is either visiting or it's not visiting. And the muse of what our little human minds call our creative, inspiration or whatever. But we yeah, we're just recipients. We're recipients, and we're being presented with huge ideas sometimes, just huge. And there's no way to actualize it. There's no way to enact it. You just have to take a piece and put it down and hope for the best, and then hope that incrementally there will be another piece that you can put together and put it down. This is what I had to learn with the synesthetic process. I had to learn that it was a process that I was to observe and watch things change in front of me. And the only thing, and I was going to kindergarten. And now I think I'm in high school.
Yeah.
I like that you said faith, because I think the two things that I try to go back to all the time to try and keep myself on course, because believe me, I fall off course all the time. That's just, that's life. That's what I'm here for. If I'm not learning something, I don't know what I'm doing. But the faith part is humongous. And then the other side of that coin for me is not having expectations. If you can let go of your expectations, you're less likely to be disappointed, And so I always think that if I can just keep doing the work and keep cleaning, if I have expectations, I'm actually putting a limit on my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And if I just trust and have faith, I'm probably going to get more than I ever could have thought of. And that continually happens. So that's the reason for Ho'oponopono being a tool that works for me, and me trying to share what it does for me.
Have faith in the space, faith in that conscious, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. You were saying, someone says, "Well, how does that relate to my life?" Well, a lot of times life is knocking on our door with stuff where we start off and we really don't know. Like if I say deja vu, like most of the people who are listening, if I say deja vu, you kind of know what I'm talking about. But if I didn't have that word deja vu, it would take me a minute to explain. It's like I knew what was going to happen, and then it happened, and da 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 da, and that's so commonplace that there's a word for it. But what's the equation? You know what I mean? What's the equal sign? E equals MC. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's something even more than our intention. It happened before we knew about it. But see what I'm saying? It's like we're in this other world. We're in this other world that visits our visits our normal reality. Most people, if you were in a crowd of 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000, and you ask how many people have experienced deja vu or know what it is, a bunch of hands would go up. But like, what scientists can put their equation on that? And that's the way a lot of it is. And the more that I'm like that, I just see this over and over and over. Like I take something like a bumblebee. You know what I mean? Like a bumblebee is not aerodynamic. The wings are too small. The body is too big. But this thing can fly like a stealth. See what I'm saying? And there's a Russian scientist. I can't think of his name right now just because I'm trying to think of it. That's been doing research on bug wings, you know? And he talks about how bug wings have all this geometry in the wings, and the geometry go to a type of lift. You know what I mean? That lifts itself. It's not just all aerodynamics, but there's actually a levitation aspect to it. And I just say levitation. It's like the yin of gravitation is levitation. It's just like the clouds. When you see clouds in the sky, that's partial levitation going on. They should be falling according to the law of gravity. They should be slowly coming to the ground, especially when they're full of all that water getting ready to happen. I mean, there's a lot of weight floating up in the air. You know what I mean? None of it makes sense. You know? So with that in mind, it's like a lot of times life just gently knocks on our door and lets you know that you really don't know. You know? You really don't know, but let me see what word you come up with it. For it. You know what I mean? Okay, deja vu, that's a cool word. You know, but there's so many things like that. The way these butterflies, bumblebees, and things are flying, we don't really fully understand the aerodynamic principle all the way. What is a fly with the goggles on his eyes like that? Really, what's going on with that technology? He's got these big eyes like that, and it's like super science just staring you in the face the whole time.
There's this guy in England, a professor at the Surrey University, I believe, Jim Khalil, I think his name is. But they're all jazz. He was sort of classic physics, and now he's coming into quantum physics, and now he's got in quantum biology. And they've been studying the European robin. And the European robin, turns out it has something in its eye that it literally, and he's talking synesthetically. He's saying literally it's seeing, but it's also smelling with its eye.
Ooh.
The Earth's gravitational pull, which is infinitesimal, which guides it on its migration pattern.
Right.
And so he's got a whole bunch of quantum physicists coming over, and they're not poo-pooing quantum biology anymore. I said, he's talking about, this is the quantum world. When you can track what's going on in a European robin's eye.
See, that's similar to what I wanted to bring up. I don't know, here we're all in the States, obviously, so I know it doesn't work for necessarily everybody who's watching, but Netflix has a documentary called Life in Color. I'm only about halfway through it.
Light and color.
It's completely fascinating because it's bringing up and now showing something that I've been aware of for a long time, which is there are colors that we cannot see, and there are sounds that we cannot hear. And so the perfect example is, they said, now we can kind of see it. And they show this flower with a camera, and they go over the flower. And this did freak me out a little bit, but they go back over it with the new camera, and there's this humongous spider sitting there that his color we cannot see. We would never know he's there. But now with this camera, they can show that he is there. And it's not just him, it's all over the place all the time.
Wow.
So
different levels of reality.
Yeah, imagine imagine if you believe in aliens. Hey, maybe they are walking amongst us. Maybe we just can't see them because of the vibrational light of what they look like. I can't even see this spider sitting on a flower without this camera, So things like that do exist, and the same with sound also, sounds that we cannot hear.
Yeah, that's for sure.
We know the limitations of our bodies. So the music that's maybe happening out there that somehow funnels through and we get to hold on to it a little bit, kind of like, I think I said it in one of the earlier ones where Dylan talked about how songs are just flying by, you just reach up and grab one,
Yeah. Is it called Life in Color?
I believe it's called Life in Color.
I have a question for you all, which we sort of touched on, but so how do you relate, or you're an artist, you're a musician, and you have an intention, but you also realize you sort of have to clean and have no intention and let things happen. How do you put those together? How do you explain them, or how do you actualize them? I mean, maybe that's what Ho'oponopono is about in the way that it helps process, but what intention and letting go? How does that, how do they work together?
I, I would say a lot of times when I go into the studio, a lot of times I have a hope. I have an idea and a hope, but
Mm,
you don't want to hang on to that too hard. The hope is like just the general North Star. I'm going here, but I can lay back enough because if you hold on to your thing too tight, a lot of times something greater than you hope for is trying to come in. You got to be open for that. Like that person brings a dimension to your idea so many times that you just didn't see. And so it's like that intention is like I just want this to be great. I just want it to be, this vehicle. But then you have to have enough room to know that you don't know everything. Like Quincy Jones talks about, you have to leave space for God to enter the room.
mm.
Even in studio, you don't know the magic that's getting ready to enter. And so to me they kind of go together. I don't know what anybody else thinks.
Yeah, I call it the void.
Yeah.
The void is really important, and not just in creation of music, but just every aspect of your life. If you fill it up too much and you don't leave a void spot, then the universe or divine or whatever can't fill it for you. And
Yeah.
that's where you got to kind of get clean with Ho'oponopono in order to kind of create a void spot so that inspiration can come through. Uh, the wish would be we knew it was inspiration. And Dr. Hulen's the first one to say, you never actually get to know right away. You don't get to. You get to find out later on sometimes down the road. And kind of like with my first meeting with him, I asked a question and he didn't answer it. He said something completely else, but it resonated so strong that later I said, did you know what you were saying to me? And he goes, no, not at all. But that's being at zero. And so that same thing falls into kind of like Roy was saying, when you're in the studio, you can go in with this hope, but you also have to create a voided spot because something else may be coming in and you need to be open to it. And that's where you end up with Kenny G and Dave Matthews and all the artists that somehow just kind of
Fred
go,
Mitchell, Brandy Carlisle.
bam, yeah, right, yeah. And then we all kind of go, wow, how'd you do that? I want to do exactly what you did. And they're like, I don't know.
I always enter into creative. I sit down with my guitars and I sit down and put together a piece of music. I start out with things that I already know, but I'm always conscious of nature abhors a vacuum. So
Yeah.
nature abhors it. So nature is going to fill me up. If I go in as a vacuum, the void or zero or whatever, if I go in as a vacuum, which means I've literally vacuumed out any inhibitions to my, to any inhibitions to flow and any inhibitions to creativity, then things start popping like crazy. And no question. And it is miraculous.
Yes. Yeah. And
It's encouraging though, right? When it happens.
Yeah.
And that's the encouragement. As long as you keep getting the encouragement, this is why gratitude journals are so important, because when you're feeling like maybe this isn't working, you can kind of go back and go, oh yeah, I remember that. Wow, that was amazing. I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah,
Right.
and I think even on a practical level, say you're an engineer in the studio, a lot of times to, we're just getting ready for magic. If you're an engineer, for me, you just need to be ready to press record before it's time to start, because the magic usually enters the room before it's go time. And if an engineer can just hit record, even you don't know what's going to happen, just hit record, because that magic usually is going to start before you're ready. And so that's kind of a practical note to, just be aware that the magic can be happening right now, and that's the exciting part, making the space for the unexpected to show up.
And I think when the magic isn't happening, that's where the cleaning comes in, as far as using Ho'oponopono, or if you have another modality that you use that works for you. When I was really young and starting out, this is going to sound silly, but every time we hit a brick wall in writing, when I was in writing circle or something like that, all I had to do was go use the bathroom. Which sounds silly, but I just needed to walk away from my instrument for a minute so I could have a new clarity. And I would come back out of the bathroom going, I think I know what it needs now. You know, it just hit me. I started to feel like the bathroom was a magical place.
Taking a break. Yeah, a lot of things you do. You need to just take a break and clear your brain a little bit. And that is sort of what Ho'opono does.
If you're having to push for it, then that's not inspiration. That's you trying to control it.
Or going out into nature and letting nature, or walking around. I just walk around, I go for long walks, and letting nature be the sherbet between courses. So it clarifies the palette. And so it clarifies the metaphoric palette. And you go back and, oh, you have a new, a new take on it. It's a new taste.
Yeah, there's a book called Mutant Message about a woman who goes on a walkabout with the Aboriginal group in Australia. And one of the things I took from it, it's a very interesting book, is the Aboriginal say, well, you all Westerners, whatever, you pray by, asking and submitting entreaties and here's what I want and all that. And the Aboriginal person said, we listen, we pray by listening. That when we pray, we're just listening. And that's a very powerful thing to do, is just listen.
Yeah.
So yes. My bird clock on the hour went off a little bit ago. I don't know if anybody who's not on video has a question, but I think it's probably time to wrap up sort of the series of 4 conversations, which have been amazing. And I've learned so much, and I can't even say what it is that I've learned. But
yeah. Before we end, I'd love to just send this out. This is a quote from Leonardo da Vinci. He says, to develop a complete mind, study the science of art, study the art of science, learn how to see, realize that everything connects to everything else, and there's something just, they call them a polymath, where they're putting together the different aspects of reality. And then he also makes this statement: let no one read my works who is not a mathematician. Leonardo.
Yeah.
So he's talking about the design. There's design behind that, the art. And so I just wanted to throw that out there, as people might have questions.
Yeah. Any last thoughts? What, we've had these 4 sessions. We don't know if we're going to do anything else. We may do something. I'm not sure, but hopefully people have enjoyed some of this or gotten something out of it. But how would you summarize what we've talked about? How would you wrap up this conversation?
If I start, just to continue, I just think one of the big morals of the story is how we feel about it affects what we see and affects the matrix. Our intention affects the fabric of reality. And the idea that Max Planck said, that there is intention behind the designs that we're studying. It's not like they're just rocks out there, just abstract, but there's some kind of design principle behind it. And so the design principle behind our intention also affects. And to me, I just learned something when you mentioned, Jefferson, the fact that there's like tri-observation going on. There's observation maybe of the design principle observing through us, and then the objects that we're looking at observing us back to respond. So I had never thought of it like that, this kind of triune observation thing. So it gets Dr. Seuss, and I like fairy tales.
Yeah, how can there be an observer without someone to observe the observer?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Matthew or Patty?
Matt, go ahead.
It's all you, Patty.
Well, out of this whole series, which I have loved, just loved talking to you guys about this. I eat this up with a spoon every day. We are phenomenon. We are a phenomenon. Human creatures are phenomena in a world of phenomena. And that's what people don't get when you try to objectify and sort and institutionalize things too much. You forget that you're living in a phenomenological universe, and that, yes, how you feel It's sentient. It feels you. It's behind you. It feels you, and it feels what you need in any given moment of time. And if you're open to its feeling, the source feeling you, and Ho'oponopono helps with that, and other healing modalities help with that. Meditation helps with that. You literally connect up to phenomena, and it literally nourishes you from day to day. But the awareness, again, the awareness has to be there. And when you're aware of it, I would say too, regarding how when we observe waves, it becomes a particle, it dumps itself down for us. I think the little things that happen every day is like, here's this little thing, take note. Here's this deja vu, take note.
No.
Your ability to take note and observe and remember is wholly dependent on your getting a big miracle later on.
You'll be ready for it.
Yeah. And you'll have a PhD in phenomena.
Mathew, any last
Oh,
thoughts?
I got to follow that.
Whatever.
I think what I would leave with is, if you're out there in the viewing audience world and you're still with us and listening to this, what some people will consider insane concepts as we go down the rabbit hole or the wormhole or whatever hole you want to call it, like Patty said, we're all Alice at some point, and this is definitely one of those conversations. One of the most difficult things that I see when I work with clients is them being able to trust themselves. Yes, we would all love somebody else to do it for us, but that's not how it works. You can gather information, you can gather tools, you can listen to people like us, and there's platforms being put out like Jefferson has done here with the Gig Society, and those are fantastic because we do need to share amongst each other, but also remember that, I think most people have more power than they realize. I think if most people ask themselves, what should I really be doing in this scenario? They probably know the answer, but we want that reassurance that somebody else, we want that witness or that try observation concept so that we're supported. We need that. That's an insecurity that comes, I think, just naturally with, if we were to look into the bloodstream in the microscope, we'd probably see a little picture that showed that, going back to that idea, which I wrote that down. That's pretty fascinating. We need to look into that more. So thank you for sharing it. But yeah, that's what I would leave with. And
I wanted to add just one little thing, one little quote.
Yeah.
To kind of consolidate the Alice thing. This is from the Mad Hatter. And this is, part and parcel of my saying, we humans are part of this phenomenological universe. And the Mad Hatter said, have I gone mad, Alice? I'm afraid so. You're entirely bonkers, but I'll tell you a secret. All the best people are.
That's
yeah.
good.
And on that madness, it's like Patty. If you're Alice, you say when you look at us, you see colors, right? What colors do you see with all three of us, Jefferson, me, and Mathew?
Well, it's very pronounced again, but this happens. There are millions of people with synesthesia. They just haven't investigated. Still doing a deep investigation. Roy, you're indigo. Boom, 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 and orange. So it's sacral chakra and brow chakra, music, mathematics, feeling, sentience. Mathew, you're indigo as well. You're indigo and lavender. You big picture realms and intuitiveness and feeling a room. Jeff, you're as orange as this. Which is sacral chakra, which is relational, which is precisely what you're doing here. You're relating and you're consolidating and you're connecting. It's literally the sacral chakra is this one up from the root chakra. So the root chakra, we establish a foundation. We stand on our ground. The sacral chakra, we start relating to the world at large. And what we're talking about is relating to phenomena. So you're relating to the phenomenon of these three people or us four together. And I'm yellow, primarily yellow, but with multicolor. I sort of yellow and cerulean blue, which is the throat chakra communication. And solar plexus chakra, which is all about systems and science and sorting and investigation and boundaries and pushing boundaries and mental clarity. So
yeah. So that's great. I just wanted to hear that answer because we're in the realm of quantum reality now.
yes, and I know that what synesthesia is a quantum event in the perception of the eyes or the ears or the sentient quality of the person. It's a quantum event.
Yeah.
And yeah.
No. I hate to cut you off. I was just going to say, if we're waiting for Einstein to write an equation about, we might be waiting a long time. But yet, you can just say it, And there's a lot of.
This is why I talked to Linda a little bit about. I was investigating cymatics in the 90s and looking at what happens with salt on a plate when you infuse it with frequency. And I was likening that to what I was seeing in people's fields when I would do readings for them, and boom, 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 boom. It would just come as fast as that.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk, and each one is the shape of your face and the sound of your voice, and your gestures, all that conspires to create a metaphoric image.
Wow.
That it just boom, and it's right there. It's right there, and it's unmistakable. And I've done repeated experiments, and they're all accurate. Because I check in with the person about the metaphor that I'm seeing. So now that's quantum, that's morphic resonance, that's spooky at a distance, that's ESP, extrasensory. I call this multidimensional perception. And I think every human has it, and many are not aware.
That makes sense entirely, because people are all putting out these energies. Patty said one time to me, everybody is just a big, beautiful note,
Right.
not just color, but note, and music is light and that. So, I really appreciate everything that we've been talking about. And part of our effort is to, use music as a way of having the conversation about how we can all appreciate these lives better, how we can see the Shakti, the gorgeousness, the heaven is everywhere. How can we can walk around thinking that there's mountaintops with snow on them everywhere we are. So I appreciate that. And we're continuing this. It's been the pandemic has been kind of a good year for creativity, but just to take a moment with the platform, we just had a show come out this week, Planetary Music Project. We're kind of doing our Anthony Bourdain thing. Bluegrass musician Tara Linhart and I had this idea to go out various places. Now we're virtually, but we went to the Devi Music Ashram in Rishikesh and talked with them and had a tour of their facility there, which is just, man, there ought to be music ashrams all over the world as far as I'm concerned. We got another Planetary Gig Talk next week on youth music programs, camps and things. Annie Beach and Brian Weber and Liz Lulu are going to be talking about that. Excellent. And next Friday also another concert for democracy, because I mentioned this before, but as Joseph Wooten says, democracy needs music and music needs democracy too, So Agaya Degbalola is going to do a concert next week, and we're going to keep doing those because democracy is really important. And last thing I'll mention is we're hoping we can get Michael back, Michael Cott, to do a conversation, and we'll let you know about that, that vibration of intention or something like that. So thank you everybody for these conversations. Really appreciate it. Thank you for everybody who's tuned in. And, if we can inspire you all to do something similar. Conversations about music and whatever, podcasts, Zoomcasts, video shows, we'll all be better off if more people do this kind of stuff. So
Nice.
namaste, everybody. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Are there any questions from Linda or Bonnie before I know we're done, but I know Linda's on the other side there.
Hey, how you doing? And I have my friend Brian here.
Hi, everyone.
He's been listening. Do you have any questions, Brian?
Well, not so much questions. I've just been very interested in all of these things that we've been talking about, whether it be focus on intention or, the unknowns of what we do know here in the world. And one thing that kind of has resonated with me is when you change, it's a quote from, I believe it's Dr. Wayne Dyer, is when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And when we started to talk about, the atoms and everything, or just different molecules and even the blood that we were talking about, where the doctor was, on a microscopic level, all of there's levels to everything, and it's just really interesting. And I'm very grateful that I was invited here to enjoy the discussion. So no questions, but just a lot of I'm being a sponge, as you say.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks for participating. That's great. Okay, I'm gonna sign off here now. Thank you.
Well, I do have
everybody.
one thing though, Jefferson.
Okay.
I wrote, how I always kind of coalesce everything from what everybody's talking about. And there's so much amazing information and wonderful stuff. And so what I wrote, and this I'll use with my students, is that the Ho'oponopono tunes us to the still point. The still point allows all possibility. Your intention then pulls forth from that possibility a outcome that suits your frequency of your intention. So in essence, when we go from, when you as musicians, before you play, you tune your instruments, right?
Yes.
And so I see the Ho'oponopono as that. We're always using that to tune ourselves to this frequency that then allows us to access all possibility, or the best possibility of then where our intention lies.
Great
And
metaphor, because we're always tuning. We're always tuning and
Exactly.
fine tuning. Great metaphor.
Yeah.
Fit is a fiddle,
exactly.
Shakespeare.
Right. So that's how the Ho'oponopono and music really work together, because the Ho'oponopono is the action of tuning ourselves so that we can get to that still point, which is the thing that Max Planck was talking about, the thing behind everything. And that's where all possibility lies. And we then bring that forth through our intention. We bring the best possibility forth, whatever our intention is.
Nice.
Yeah.
You can actually think about that in terms of Nada Brahma and music of the spheres, as Bill Barclay would say that, the in the Nada Brahma book, Ernst, I forget his name exactly, I can't say it. He's sort of positing that the whole universe, which is created by sound, is seeking harmony. The planets seek harmony. We're, bees are seeking harmony. All of us were seeking harmony. And in a way, that's like the hero's journey. And even cells and bees and trees, it's like everything is sort of seeking that harmony. And Ho'opono helps us in some ways. But it's like we're all on a hero's journey, and not just us, but this mug and everything else. There's so many great ways to think about what it is that we're doing on this planet.
Yeah.
Even when I think about that whole episode of the sperm going the race towards the egg and only one gets chosen, that's so epic right there.
It is.
It's just such an epic journey, man. It's like, who can explain that to you? I feel like I'm going to have a conversation with an angel, and that's going to be the first thing. break this down to me. Like I've been wanting to talk to one of y'all. You know. But yeah.
I wanted to say, Linda, what you just said is exactly. I think it was back in, it was either 2015 or 2016. Joe Vitale was doing an event. It was completely booked up, and one day it just kind of hit me. I called him up. I said, "Hey," I said, "can I speak at that event?" And he goes, "Well, what are you going to talk about?" And I said, I don't know." I said, "I only got one idea. The one inspiration that came to me is I'm going to get up on stage, take my guitar, I'm going to play a little bit, then I'm going to detune my guitar. I'm going to play basically the same exact thing.
That's good.
And then I'm going to talk about being in tune and the reason that clean brings vibrational level back." And sure enough, I sat up there, played a little nice line. Everybody's like, "Ooh." And then detuned it, and it sounded horrible to a point where I think I started laughing because everybody was kind of going, "Oh, that's horrible." And I was like, "Yeah, why is it horrible?" One person in the audience said, "Because you're not in tune." So there you go.
That's
Yeah.
good.
It went from there. So exactly what you were just saying. I agree with that so much.
And then there's the difficulty in of tuning, whether you're tuning in 440 megahertz or whether you're tuning in 432. And
That's right.
yeah, and 432 is closest to natural resonance.
That's
It's
when all
closest to the harmonic resonance of the earth.
432.
440 is a man-made frequency that came out in the 30s.
for political.
Yeah.
So you could take this to the nth degree, man.
But that's beautiful. I was thinking that, but I was trying not to say it. Like, all the mathematics
They tell me everything.
become beautiful when you go to when A is at 432.
Yes, in 432, everything just lands like a bunch of pennies lining up. I also think of the Tao De Ching, which says, no, for as far as alignment is concerned, it says, know the masculine, the creative, but keep to the feminine, the receptive. And so you want to be receptive to what you're tuned into. You want to be really receptive to it. And this is with the body, it translates, know the acid, but keep to the alkaline. And that's what the blood does. The blood is slightly alkaline. Everything is you've got to stay slightly, just slightly. So it's, we talked about balancing constantly and staying in balance, the planet, the blood, everything, staying in balance. And that's what 432 tuning represents to me.
Right. And just so you don't forget, man, when we get off, just Google, I think his name is Dr. Beagleson, holographic blood. And you'll see lectures of him talking about it, and his sons talk about it, and they show pictures from the book. And when he learned about it, he learned from a Russian lady who was telling this patient all about this stuff. She said, "How do you know?" She said, I see the pictures in your blood.
It's written in the blood.
Now, I'm just saying, yeah, this is Dr. Seuss. It's kind of biblical. It's like,
but that's like water. That's like Emoto's work with water and rivers. Rivers collect all the impressions as they flow downstream.
Yeah.
Water molecules collect the impression. They have the most surface on their, so it collects a holographic impression of whatever's going on upstream.
Yeah. Yeah.
And upstream is your past.
Yeah. This was so powerful. He could see a brain leak before the doctors, the CAT scan. The doctors didn't see it, but he saw it in the blood that there was a leak happening at the back of the thing. And they said, go back and get a CAT scan. And sure enough, it was there. So it's that the idea that it's communicated in pictures like that. This is, you just got to try to wrap your mind around that. But it's like spooky action at a distance, man. Einstein, he's gonna have a hard time writing an equation around that.
I'm gonna have us go off Facebook. Thanks everybody, and who knows when we'll see you next or what we'll be talking about. Music and synesthesia, Patty.
Whoa.
Woo.
Yeah. Hey.
All right.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah.
All right.
There's people that can actually taste chords. I'm like, wow.
Yes, indeed.